Okay, so without further ado, we're going to take questions after the panel, but I'd like to bring up our panelists and thank them for coming to Austin today. First, I want to bring up Dan Jurgens, best known as the writer of 1992's The Death of Superman. From Superman to Action Comics, Dan is associated with the Man of Steel, spanning 30 years. And Dan, we counted this morning, and we think you've written 225 Superman stories.
I never counted. Never counted, okay.
225 Superman stories since 1986. That's pretty impressive. So take a seat and watch your bottle of water there. Next is Jim Lee, one of the most acclaimed comic book artists in the world. Jim's also, when he's not drawing on Twitch all night, he is also a publisher along with Dan DiDio of DC Entertainment. And Dan and Jim recently have brought something pretty exciting to the publishing group, which is some new lines of comics, which we're very, very excited for, including books for young readers, DC Zoom and DC Inc., an expansion of the Sandman universe with Neil Gaiman, as well as, we just announced this week, Black Label. Standalone, edgy, provocative storytelling that's out of continuity. And they're probably going to get into that a little bit today because our next guest, Frank Miller, is writing one of those books. And it just so happens to be a Superman book. Frank is a renowned artist, writer, and creative visionary. His unique take on the DC characters has led us to some best-selling titles like the Dark Knight trilogy, as well as others. And in honor of Frank, we're even selling some 300 back here. I know, all Warner Brothers all the way. All right, next is the newest member of the team, Brian Michael Bendis. Please join us. Brian's been busy revolutionizing Marvel Comics for the last 20 years. And we are so thrilled that he's jumped ship, and we recently announced that he's rocked the comic world by joining DC. All right, next, let's go to Krypton. What happened before Superman got here? Let's find out. Cameron Welsh is the executive producer of upcoming sci-fi show Krypton. He's also a longtime DC family member, as he also produced Constantine. Next is Nadria Tucker. She's a writer on Krypton, and she previously wrote for WBGN's Underground, and we're looking forward to her take on the Superman legacy. And finally, Lina Patel, also a writer on Krypton. Lina is a graduate of the Warner Brothers TV Writers Workshop, which is a pretty special program that Lisa Gregorian and her team put together with some help of some colleagues across Warner's, and it's to find the next great writers and to make sure that we're always feeding the creative pipeline. And then moderating this all-star lineup is not me, thank God, but somebody who actually knows how to ask good questions, and that's Laura Prudom from IGN, longtime journalist, and very well-respected DC fan, Superman fan, and she's going to take it from here. Thanks. That's right.
Hi guys, thank you all for being here. Thank you guys all for being here, braving the heat. To kick us off, Dan, you've obviously worked on one of the most seminal moments in all of comics with the death of Superman. So what was it like to be part of that pop culture phenomenon at the time, looking back?
It was singularly unique because I don't think we'd ever see anything like that again. A lot of different things had to come together in order for that to happen. But it was really all about a story that dealt with what Superman means to us in terms of by taking him out of the books, that's how you really addressed what he meant to everybody. So it worked out very well, very unique.
Yeah. And you're currently building to the end of your run on Action Comics, so what can we expect? You're not going to kill him again before you pass him off to Brian, right?
No, not going to kill him at all. This is, I have a story that is titled From the City That Has Everything. And that's sort of a play on words from a famous Alan Moore story for the man who has everything. And it addresses somewhat the same sort of theme, which is the idea of what does Superman mean to Metropolis. And I think it's a fitting story for Action 1000, something that's actually been around for 1,000 issues.
Amazing. Well, Jim, First you took the red trunks away and fans freaked out. Now 5 years later you're bringing them back and fans have freaked out again. So what's it like to kind of make these changes to such an iconic character?
It's a heavy responsibility.
Changing trunks?
Yes, changing the trunks. You know, it's funny. I think even when we took away the trunks, we knew that eventually they would return. I mean, all things in comics. No one remains dead. No trunks remain unworn. So we knew they would eventually come back, but we wanted to wait for, and we knew there would be a moment that would arrive, but we had no plan really exactly when that would happen. And then I think Brian coming over and then hitting 1,000 and looking at the character, ways to reinvent or do new things with him. Going back to the red trunks was a really cool way of kind of going forward by going backwards, because there's other things that Brian's doing that's going to kind of really change the fans' understanding of the character. And we thought by bringing back the red trunks, we could kind of make it a more palpable transition or change. And so it's a bit of a it's a fun thing to do. These are the things that we can kind of play around with, that we know that the fans respond to. But at the end of the day, it's all about the story. And so as much as they react to the trunks leaving or coming back, at the end of the day, it's the story and the character. And we have some really exciting things planned. And so we feel that the trunks really kind of help bring notice to the fact that we're going to be doing these changes with the character himself.
Frank, tell us a little bit about your new DC Black Label book, Superman Year One, which I think launches in August. How is this kind of a new take on Superman's origin story?
The whole idea behind this book is to introduce Superman as if you'd never heard of him in the first place, and bring him back to some of the things that make the character so extraordinary. The galactic voyage he takes as a boy, the way he discovers the world, and the way he's so emblematic of a hero's journey. He's so biblical in his dimension. But it's mostly, for me, it's going from the gloomy dark guy to the hero of the sun, and doing my best to do justice to this, but to treat it as a brand new idea.
Brian, hi. Welcome. I've read that one of the reasons you decided to come to DC was to work on Superman. Is that true? What about the character draws you in so much?
Well, I was just telling the other guys this, I'm a little Jewish boy from Cleveland, and in Cleveland you grow up and you're told over and over again, rock and roll and Superman were born here. That's all we have, and some decent pizza. And so it was like they off in front of me. Everyone thought maybe I'd come to do Batman, but all I wanted to do was Superman. And I surprised Dan and Jim with this, and then it was the next phone call where Dan calls me up and goes, you can have the shorts. You want the shorts? And I go, yeah, the shorts is a thing. He goes, there's a lot of controversy with the shorts. I think you should bring the shorts back. I go, I'm done. And now my life is filled with strangers from all over the world tweeting me about other people's underwear. It's a wonderful door I've opened for myself. But honestly, the idea of hope in this environment that we're growing up in right now, it seems now more than ever we need Superman. It just feels like it's time for Superman, and writing a character who exudes hope to everyone around him, and the burden that is. It's a burden to carry for everyone, and we've seen it with other public figures and stuff where they represent something so much larger than themselves, and we're going to experience what that feels like, and then we're going to experience what it feels like for him personally.
What can you tell us about the upcoming stories? You obviously have a story in the 1,000.
Yeah, that was another exciting thing. Dan calls up and he goes, listen, I don't want to be, I don't want to get too excited, but we have Action Comics 1000 just really around the corner. It just sounds like the perfect place for you to start your run and like do a little tease maybe. And I'm like, like one of my favorite comics of all time is Superman 400, which is the celebration of Superman not just as a character and an icon, but just as comics as art. You're in there actually. There's all these beautiful stories and drawings by some of the greatest artists of all time. So to be part of the 1000th version of that is crazy. It was so exciting to be part of. So we're using that as a jumping on point for what we're going to do, which is the very next week is Man of Steel #1. It's a 6-issue big event. Every single issue drawn by one of the greatest artists of DC Comics, and by the end of that storyline, we're going to have a new status quo and a new situation for Superman and his arrangement in the DC universe. And then right after that is Superman #1, followed right after that by Action Comics 1001, and we'll be taking him into the future.
Krypton is obviously a very unique combination of past and future. So why did that feel like such a fertile ground for storytelling in terms of this new series?
Well, I think what makes it an important story to tell now is touching on some of the things that you guys said already. What Dan spoke about with Superman, when he's not there, we feel his absence and we understand what he means. And part of what we do in Krypton is explore an idea of what would happen to the universe if Superman was never born. That becomes one of the plot points that we sort of pivot around. And then, like Brian said, at this time, I think the idea of hope, a character who embodies hope, is really important for us. So while we don't have the character of Superman, we explore his legacy. We explore the foundations of that legacy and the House of L and how it came to be defined as being emblematic of hope.
Nadira, hi down there. What has been your favorite part of kind of writing this new chapter in Superman's mythology, being able to play in this sandbox?
I think my favorite part has been getting to know in depth the mythology behind Superman. I mean, there's a lot. We're here celebrating 80 years, so there's a lot to get to know, and just to have the opportunity to be able to add to that in a substantial way that hasn't been explored before is really cool. So there's a lot that we've been able to do and play with.
Lina, since time travel is involved, does this mean that we can kind of expect that maybe things could change, the future could change? Is it kind of malleable? Can you talk a little bit about how you're playing with time and the repercussions of that moving forward?
Yeah, the opportunity to time travel gives us a lot of creative freedom. Literally anything can happen, and it keeps our story focused on the present day, on Krypton, what's happening to our characters in that world that we're creating.
I love it. And Krypton as a place is somewhere that hasn't been too deeply explored in kind of the comics and on screen so much. So how much license does that take you? Can you talk a little bit, any of you on the show, about kind of creating that world and that mythology and being able to really build a civilization in a way that we haven't seen?
I think that's one of the most exciting things about doing the show is that while we all know what Krypton is, it has been relatively unexplored compared to a lot of other worlds in the DC universe. So the opportunity to do that kind of world building was great. Really exciting. I think we took a lot of inspiration from John Byrne's World of Krypton. That was one book we leaned on heavily. But apart from that, we really had a lot of freedom to kind of create what we needed for the show.
I'll speak for you.
Yeah, speak for everyone. You and Jim are working together on Action Comics, so can you talk a little bit about the collaboration process?
Yeah, actually, this is a really exciting thing for me. I've been a fan of Jim's for years and years and years, and it just seemed throughout the entirety of my career that Jim and I were never going to be in the same place at the same time, that I could even get in line to work with him. So that was another thing as we were discussing me coming over, and they said, and you and Jim, that'll be the first thing. And I'm like, great, that'd be fantastic. And so writing for Jim was really exciting because we're very different kinds of creators, and I pride myself in writing towards my artist's voice and the artist's world view, and I wrote as big as I possibly could, like as big as I've ever written for anybody, just big for Jim. And he still added 2 pages to it. I was so excited by that, I can't even tell you. So yeah, it's a big Superman filled with iconic imagery, and it really teases everything you're going to need to know going forward for Man of Steel. And we drop a bomb on our very last page about the Superman mythology that will have people talking, hopefully more about that than his underpants.
Crypto is back.
Krypton is back, and he's been behind every crisis since the beginning of Crisis.
We knew it.
What about Sparky?
Sparky, that guy's a pain.
I'm gonna pass it back to Frank. Frank, you obviously have written for both Batman and Superman. You have such an amazing grasp on both of these characters. Is there one that you find easier to get into the mindset of? How have you kind of found working with Superman?
Yeah, the
versus
more
working with
I
Batman?
think about Superman, the more in love with him I get.
Yeah.
With Batman, it's now he's a familiar, he's a guy I've known a long time. But with Superman, he's a world to explore.
Yeah.
And his what I love about him is his purity. Yeah. That he is in every sense an absolute hero. Yeah. And a hero is a wonderful device to define everything else around him. So then he has the small town aspect, but he's also an alien. Yeah. So he's as quintessentially American a character as you'll ever find.
Yeah. Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about working with Brian after that?
Yeah.
I met Brian, I want to say like 2005 or something. It was at a convention, like an after party or something like that, and he was working at Marvel, and that's kind of when we started talking about collaborating. And I was drinking that night, and so I thought we were bonding over drinks, and like, oh, you know how that is, and like this is so cool, like, and we were talking about crazy, interesting projects. And then only years later, actually, did I discover that Brian doesn't drink at all. So it was a one-way collaboration that was going on in my head, like, and I was trying to think, like, what did I promise? What did I say?
I did call Joe Casada. I go, I think we're doing Wildcats Avengers.
Yes,
I just agreed to something.
I thought it was a crazy idea. So, what was really cool about that is that we clicked that night, and so we talked about doing something, and it took about 13 years for something to finally happen, and it was really interesting working on this because it's the 1000th issue, and it's also his first issue, and I really wanted to welcome him to DC. So we added those extra 2 pages. I pulled out all the stops, and I did feel some bit of response or a burden on my shoulders a bit because it is the 1000th issue, and I do feel like I've kind of taken a shortcut to that. In that
you do.
Yeah, exactly. Like Dan, he did 200 issues, so you've done
about 3 generations of dead artists.
He's done 20% of the run. I'm coming in for 12 pages of all the stories produced, and but at the same time, it's amazing to be working with Brian on such a seminal character, on this historic issue, and it's not just a throwaway issue. It's actually the start of a much bigger saga that he's introducing, and so it was really, really cool, and I'm honored to be part of the issue and to be working with Brian.
Dan, can you talk a little bit about saying goodbye to the character? Obviously, as we've mentioned, it's been a long run. You've done so many seminal stories. How is it to kind of be going out on this high?
Well, it's 1000 is a great place to do it. Yeah. I don't know if we ever say goodbye in comics because things have a way of coming back. Yeah. But I think what it has given me is a chance to make, and every writer looks for this, I think, which is the chance to make a couple of final statements about what it is you've invested so much time and energy in, and kind of that fond farewell to the character, which fits very, very well in something like Action Comics 1000.
I love it.
If I can though, it's funny you mentioned Dan's history with the character, and with like Chris Claremont on X-Men, there's like everyone kind of connects those two, but what Dan's done on Superman is equal to that achievement. over 30 years of shepherding major events of a major pop culture character, and he said it like so so chill that I think now people can step back and go, wow, that was decades of storytelling. That's insane. And I think it's so rare in any part of pop culture that someone gets to do that it's certainly worth celebrating.
Thank you.
I want to go down the line and talk to you each about what is your favorite Superman story? What is the kind of first memory you have, or something that has kind of always stuck with you about the character that you're kind of bringing to your careers now?
The first comic I ever bought was a Superman comic when I was a kid at the grand old price of 12 cents. As far as my favorite story, and it just so happens to be reprinted in the book that we have here that we're selling right now. It's right over there, the South by Southwest special edition, which is Superman's Return to Krypton. And I think it was about the first time we really saw Superman with an ability to go back to Krypton and see what it was like. And it's a mid-50s, I think, era story, but it had a certain sense of magic to it. And I first read it in a reprint edition. It was just being able to see that. And it's funny, it kind of fits with the talk of the TV series and everything, but to actually see Superman go back and visit the planet of his birth was sort of heartbreaking. And it was portrayed as this really cool place. And I just remember reading that. I was probably like 10 years old and thinking, this is awesome. So that would be my favorite.
Amazing.
So I have 3. So really quick.
That's allowed. That's allowed. Huh? That's allowed.
Okay, sorry. So in terms of art, it was Superman versus Muhammad Ali. It was like that oversized and obviously Neil Adams, Dick Giordano, and that to me showed the full range of that character from fighting an interstellar invasion force to walking the streets of Metropolis in amongst the people as Clark Kent, to fighting Muhammad Ali. There's a character that can do anything and getting beat by Muhammad Ali or faking a defeat, right? So and then just some of the very best Neil Adams art. But then I'm gonna say the one that really inspired me to get in comics was the Dark Knight Returns, and what Frank did with Superman in that story was amazing, because all throughout my childhood, Superman and Batman were kind of interchangeable. They were old chums. They actually wore each other's costumes and pretended to be each other, and the only time they would fight is if one of them ate kryptonite or something, And what I loved about Dark Knight Returns is that it was a very sophisticated narrative that showed really how these two men looked at the world in very, very different ways, based on their origins, based on their capabilities, and it just really differentiated the two characters for me, and actually made me love Superman just as much, even though he very much differed from his point of view in Superman, and the role that he played, the twist in that story, the wink of that character to Carrie Kelly at the end, it just really, really was a great moment. And then I'm going to go to Death of Superman with Dan, because when you think about that character and doing a story where you are killing him and doing it on a national stage is a very, very daunting thing to do, a lot of work, and I think they just hit all the right notes from the splash pages to the cover, and just really, and introduced a new villain to do it on top of all that. So they really, I think, really kind of pulled off an amazing story in a very fitting way. So those are my 3.
Well, he's probably going to put simply. My favorite Superman story isn't really in a comic book. I recently saw it again. Yeah. It's an episode of the old Fleischer Brothers cartoons called Runaway Train, or $1 Billion Limited. I always get confused about the title. But it's where those Fleischer Brother cartoons are wonderful for their simplicity. And in this one, bad guys get a hold of a train full of gold, and Superman stops it. The end. But getting there is amazing. Railroad ties are exploding underneath his feet. He's strained to his absolute limit, and he's shown as the absolute hero he is. But it takes a whole damn train to show you how heroic he is.
That's a good one. And following up, I recently showed my children for the first time Superman the movie, the Richard Donner first Superman movie. And my son is 5 years old, and I wasn't sure he'd make it through the movie. Riveted. 2.5 hours, didn't budge, didn't see it as an old movie, he just was completely riveted by the experience of Superman and everything about it. So
even the underground stuff with Lex Luthor and
love that more than anything. Was laughing at jokes that I didn't even think you'd get. Just the timing of it, like the rhythm of it, he just really loved. And
even Can You Read My Mind?
Yeah. Well, hilariously, all of my children had the exact same response to the "Can You Read My Mind" thing, which is, "Oh, is this happening? Is this really happening? Is there going to be kissing?" Yeah. So
is there going to be kissing?
Well, they're little, and kissing is it's a really tough sell. Anyway, but back to comics. I agree, obviously, with Jim. I'm at an age where Dark Knight Returns rattled me as a comics creator, as a reader, as a fan of the characters, and it explored truths I had not seen before. It was also like the first time I had ever seen Superman in a panel with no words on it. Just like the powerful image of Superman is enough. So these things like changed me. It's hard to even describe it since at an age. And at the same time, Alan Moore had put out Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and that was dealing with the burden of Superman, the struggle of Superman, and I'd never seen it that way before. And it was the man was suffering. So that, and listen, I just spent the last 6 months deep diving all things Superman, so I could do this all day. But Superman 400, also Jeff Johns' Superman and the Legion of Superheroes story I really, really like. There's so much. I think people will be surprised if you really dig in. There's so many excellent little nuggets and surprise gems in the Superman run.
It's like I'm a broken record because I always say this, but Superman is like a diamond. You can smash him against the floor, the ceiling, and the wall. He doesn't break.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I think I have to sort of repeat a lot of what's been said. Really, I think The Dark Knight Returns was massive for me. But so was Death of Superman. I was at school when that came out, and it was all anybody could talk about. I really distinctly remember getting my hands on that, seeing those splash pages. This is in a small town in rural Australia, and everybody just gathered and just poured over it. It was a massive event. It was huge. So those the Donner film for sure. That was probably the one that really captured me. Loved Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And the other one I'll throw in would be All-Star Superman by Morrison. I think that's a great story. Again, it just shows that I think part of what I love about that is the humanity of the alien, that we see in that story, and his kind of all that power, but the restraint that kind of comes with it that's unifies.
So I'm a TV kid and a kid of the 80s and 90s, so I'm gonna say Smallville. And I don't know if you guys know, but one of the writers in Smallville works on Krypton, and so getting to work with her, Doris Egan, has been awesome. And just kind of updating that mythology for today on TV with all the love triangles and all that wonderful, juicy TV stuff that we love. It's cool.
I'm still not following the comments, but the Donner film, the memory I have growing up in Irving, Texas, and being a little girl, my mom bringing the film home and us watching it together just made the world a little bigger. I watched it with my daughter recently, and it was just, and she knows that I'm working on Krypton as an adult, so she can't see that, but watching Superman, the Donner Superman, it was just, it brought back so many memories of being a little kid myself, feeling like I didn't fit in, and just like what it meant to me at that time, growing up in Irving, it just made me feel less alone, and I feel like today everyone's gotten so cynical and slick, and so working on Krypton now is kind of great because we're creating that legacy of hope, and so I feel like I'm sort of revisiting some of my favorite movies when I'm watching the Donner when I was a kid.
We want to open it up to questions here. If anyone has one, if you want to raise your hand and we'll throw a microphone at you. Anyone? Yes, sir.
This is a Dan Jurgens question. Your long tenure with the character, shepherded it through a number of editorial changes and regimes. What in your last kind of couple of years with the character, what have you been able to do with Clark and the whole cast of characters that you wouldn't have been able to do, say, in like 1988?
I think that right now, in terms of what we have for a storytelling ability, is a more patient audience. That we can, if I go back to 1988, I think we tried to take a story and wrap it up a little quicker, whereas now we can let things really unfold. And I think explore character a little more fully than we did then. That's just my perception. I know I certainly work differently now than I did in 1988. So I think that allows us to explore different ramifications of the character that back then we would not spend as much time on. And we can explore Clark's life and Melissa's life a little more fully that way. And I think that allows for a deeper story, ultimately.
Jim, as co-publisher, one of my favorite parts of the Superman world is Lois Lane. And we're talking a lot about things that are happening with Superman himself. But as we have all of these diversified lines that are emerging at DC, is there room for example, maybe Lois Lane to get, even if not an ongoing series, a mini-series, something like that? Are there big plans for Lois?
Yeah. How do you answer that one, Jim?
Well, I know you're a longtime fan of comics and DC Comics, so you know full well that we could not disclose anything that we would have. If we had any plans, I would wink twice. But all I can say is that Brian has a lot of plans, and he's a very prolific writer, and we have a lot of other tremendous writers that have the same passion for a lot of the characters of the whole DC mythology. So I can't really speak beyond that, other than to say we are fully aware of the love of these characters, and we would be remiss in not addressing the desires of the readership and the fans to see more of those kinds of stories.
So that means a crypto ongoing.
I don't know what that means. This is what publicity tells me to say when tough questions come up.
Very nicely done.
Hi guys, open question to anybody. For me, Superman is closely tied to being a reporter and journalism being under attack. I'm just kind of curious as to what you guys think of that and how it might pop up in future stories.
Hey, Brian.
I'll grab that one.
Yeah.
I actually spent the day yesterday shadowing as an Oregonian. I live in Portland, so just to show you how important the Daily Planet is to the stories we'll be telling. Because I on top of, yes, journalism being under siege in a way in my lifetime it had never been before, but on top of that, I'm absolutely fascinated by the fact that a lot of what has happened to Clark has happened to Clark. Like, he was sent here. Choices were made for him. The biggest choice he made for himself is to be a reporter. Like, he chose that. Like, he doesn't have to do anything. He chose, I need to be with them, and of all the jobs I could have, I think I need this one. Why? Because truth. There's parts of truth and justice that Superman can't punch his way through, but Clark can reveal truth through journalism, through storytelling, through, you know, and his looking for it. I think being a reporter is an extension of that. That fascinates me. That's him saying, this is what I want to do. And as a writer, and I have a lot of friends that are journalists, and I deeply understand that connection to, like, having that perfect day of, I told the truth today. I told the story people needed to hear, and I was the only one who could have done it. Training yourself to be that on top of everything else he has to do is fascinating to me, so we'll be diving into that head first, because nothing is more fascinating to me.
There's also it's a wonderful case where you can show his courage. There's a bit on the old George Reeves TV show where something's going down, and I think Perry White says, "Where's Kent?" And Lois says, "Oh, you know Clark." I mean, he's tearing off and taking care of something. It was this whole mild-mannered thing came much later. I like a good brave Clark Kent.
And that's what I like about Lois Lane too. I've said
Oh,
out
she's
loud.
fearless.
Yeah, she may be the bravest person in the DC universe.
Yes.
Because listen, Clark's diving in, but
Well,
you know.
let's remember, she was the one who, in the Donner movie, decided to figure out to make to test whether Clark could fly or not by throwing herself out of a skyscraper.
Again, a bold choice, but still. I do, regardless, I do think Lois is probably the bravest, most
Without
fearless
question.
person because she's got nothing to back it up.
If you look at the old cartoons, she was always charging into combat far before Superman.
Yep.
Anyone else? Yes, Melania.
Hello. This one's for Mr. Miller. You worked with John Romita Jr. on Man Without Fear.
Yep.
So I was wondering what it's like to work with him again so many years later.
I was going to ask that.
It's like going to heaven without dying. He's magic. Every time I talk over a scene with him or write something down, what comes back is brilliant and better than I could have done. He's as good as they get.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Joe Quesada described it once that Johnny draws everybody like they're made out of granite. Like they've been sculpted on the page. It's kind of amazing.
Not little Kal-El. I'm in love. He's the little boy is so precious.
That's good.
And because we spent some time in the rocket with him, and those big blue eyes are staring at you, taking in the universe.
Yes, sir.
John Coltrane.
This one's for the TV folk, for Krypton. Time travel is obviously a big mechanic in the show. As I understand it, part of it is Adam Strange goes back to Krypton before he explodes. So Kal-El himself is not going to be a character in the show. How do you communicate what he means in the present day back in the past?
That's a good question. I think, what Superman stands for today is hope, right? That's what the symbol currently means. And what we've done is sort of work backwards from there. What are the traits and values that, you need in order to instill hope in someone, to raise someone to become Superman? It's not just about his bloodline, it's also about, the way they lived and the values that they hold. So I think that's kind of where we come at it from.
I think because you mentioned Adam, he definitely will be one in for the audience watching, because Adam has all the love of Superman that we all have, and he's constantly going to be bringing that up because he has an agenda. It's very specific, and Superman's grandfather, Varsho Seg, he doesn't know who Adam is. He doesn't know who his grandson is, so he's discovering that through Adam. He's an extremely relatable character.
Can you guys talk a little bit about some of the other DC characters that you've got coming in? Because there are some really great cameos and things that you're weaving in, so I'd love to get that in there too. Perfect.
As Lina mentioned, Adam Strange is a big part of the show. That's a really fun character for us to have and to play with. And he is kind of like a proxy for the audience in a lot of ways. He's the alien in this world. It's kind of the inverse of most Superman stories, where he's the alien on Earth, Earthman and alien on Krypton. So he's our eyes and our point of view for a lot of the show. One of the other characters from the DC world that we have in the first season is Doomsday, and we're pretty excited about that. And in our writers' room we have the death of Superman, and we have quite a few particular panels blown up and stuff on the walls, and we pay homage to that.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that.
Well, I hope you like it.
Yeah.
And we also have Brainiac.
Of course, you got him.
that we're really excited about. I think it's the first time Brainiac's been done in live action, which is quite extraordinary, really. That this is the first time, but there it is. And
he looks fantastic. He's beautifully done.
Yeah, we're happy with the way it came out. I mean, we made a choice in how we wanted to do Brainiac, and we were trying to decide between making him a fully CG character or whether to use prosthetics and what would work best for us in terms of TV budget, but also to give the fans the Brainiac that they kind of that they've been waiting so long for and that they deserve. So we're happy with the way it came out. So yeah, again, another really great character to write.
Amazing. And sadly, I think that's all we have time for.
That's the news for now, but remember to check out DC All Access every weekday to stay up to date on everything going down in the DCU. See you next time.